And just to think, everybody, that just a little over 22 years ago, that same Tom Brady, he looks about just as young as he did way back then in January of 2000, was in that same state doing what he did tonight against the Alabama Crimson Tide at the Orange Bowl. Wow, that's amazing to think about, is it not? Regardless of what you think of Tom Brady, it's an unparalleled career in football. All right, welcome to the Voice of College Football. Here on a Thursday night, midnight. It's now Friday, and that means technically it's only one day to a college football weekend. And I think that there are some games on Friday night that we can certainly celebrate and enjoy, but not necessarily anything that's that riveting or that important to the national scene. But football is football. So let me know tonight which games you're looking forward to this weekend, which even though we're all happy to have football back, have to admit that it's a bit of a sparse schedule on Saturday. Thank you, Big Ten, for supplying some decent games on Saturday. Outside the Big Ten, it's really, really bad. So week one, tons of great games. Week two, a couple great matchups. Just another reason why we need autonomy. One of the reasons why we need a centralized governing body of college football that can look at the schedule, everybody's schedule at the same time, and say, let's make sure that we've got great matchups every weekend. Yes, there is Michigan, Washington, Ohio State, Oregon, Iowa, Iowa State, and Texas, Arkansas. And that's about it. So not a lot of good matchups on Saturday. So hopefully those matchups I just mentioned will pull through, because it's a sparse schedule after the amazing slate of games that we had last weekend. And again, if we had a governing body over college football that was in charge of scheduling, first and foremost, they could take care of such issues. All right. I am here to address my top 25 that actually makes sense. I will be taking your calls as well. So this is the call-in show, folks, 860-499-3332, but I will not take any calls, so please don't grab for the phone right now until I have answered at least a few comments from the top 25 that actually makes sense, which now stands at 405 comments. I am not going to answer 405 comments, so don't worry about that. We're not going to be here until 6:30 in the morning. I don't think most of these people really grasp what the top 25 that actually makes sense is all about. So that's why I'm here. So we're going to explain that first and foremost for a lot of you who, and it's understandable, it's kind of like sticker shock, are seeing this top 25 that actually makes sense for the first time. So when something has been ingrained in you and beaten in your head for decades, for years and years and years, that doesn't make sense, but is beaten down into you as this is the way we do things, and then you're shown the light, I get it. It takes an explanation or two. We have to go over it a few times for people to get it. And for many of you, you've stuck with me, you listened, and you've come around. Let me make one thing clear before I get to the comments and questions and then address these comments and questions right here. Let me make this clear. I have never professed this to be the perfect top 25. It's not perfect. It's not flawless. Nobody's rankings are flawless, whether they're taken by one person or a million people. So I've never pretended that this is a perfect top 25. I've only said that it makes sense. I'm not saying that if UAB is number 10 in the country, that it's not reasonable to think that they could be number 13 or number 9 or number 7. Yes, it just makes sense. It's not necessarily flawless or perfect. Okay, so yes, I want you guys to push back on it. Let me know where you think I've erred. But at least understand the process. I'm not ranking the top 25 teams in the country in regards to who I believe are the best teams in the country. I did that way back in January after the national championship game. I gave a spring, way too early top 25, which I flat out said, these are my top 25 teams in the country as it stands right now. These are the 25 teams I believe to be the 25 best teams in the country, 1 through 25. I'm not taking the schedule into account, nothing else. And that's the way that stood. And people complained that I didn't take the schedule into account and said, well, they've got a really tough schedule. They've got an easy schedule. I did not take the schedule into account. So when it comes to this top 25, that actually makes sense every Monday, what you're going to see is a resume ranking. I believe that we need to rank teams. If we're going to rank teams, I think we should rank them actually on what they've done on the field. Let's rank the teams based on what they've shown us on the field, not what we believe is going to happen 3 weeks from now or in November or in December. When that actually happens, then we can rank the teams based on the performance, on the results on the field when it actually happens. Why don't we do that? Rank the teams based on the performance and the results on the field. Do I believe that some of these teams will end up with a ranking that they've earned thus far? No, I do not. Do I believe, for example, that Virginia Tech's the 8th best team in the country? I do not believe that they are the 8th best team in the country. I have awarded them with the 8th best performance of week 1. That's what I've done. These are the teams that have performed the best in week 1. That's all we've got. We got week 1. And we got a little bit of a week 0, but we basically have week 1. That's all we've got. So pardon me that I get people uncomfortable because I'd like to approach things a little bit more logical, a little bit more sensical, and a little bit different. If we're going to continue to rank Oklahoma at a top 5 position in the country, regardless of how they play, and that they could win, let's say, the next couple of weeks against Western Carolina and Nebraska. They could, what if they win the next 2 weeks against Western Carolina and Nebraska 40-35 and almost blow the game like they did against Tulane? They will have played 2 teams that are worse than Tulane and maybe Nebraska better or about the same as Tulane and given us the same performance. You know what's going to start to happen? They're going to start to drop a little bit in the rankings. I mean, in the Associated Press and in the coaches poll. Why? I really don't know, because they only gave us 1 performance and they would just be confirming that performance. So why would they stay in the same position? I am ranking the results and the performance. So point number 1 is we rank based on wins. Did you win the game? Some people get caught up on that and don't listen to the rest of my explanation and just listen to, okay, if you win the games, then that's all that matters to Mark. No, that's not where I complete my explanation, because if it was, what would we have? How could we rank teams, especially the first week of the season? If we only went wins and losses, then we would have 130 teams in the FBS. Guess what? We'd have roughly, because some teams play FCS teams, but roughly we'd have 65 teams tied for number 1 in the country. That's what we would have. And I'd have a list and it would say number 1, and I would just put them in alphabetical order, and then number 65, and it'd be all the teams that lost. And that would be the ranking. But no, I base it on their performance on the field as well. So if team A beats team B 50-0, I rank that differently and evaluate it differently than if team A beats team B 17-14. But most importantly is that they won the game. That's most important, that they won the game. And yes, I do have teams that have lost games ranked higher than teams that won games last week because I value their performance on the field as playing well, playing tough against a superior opponent, as opposed to a team that won against a bad opponent. And then people then go to the next step to say, well, how do you know teams are good or teams are bad? Nobody knows that. We wouldn't be able to do my rankings. We wouldn't be able to do anybody's rankings. Nobody could rank anybody if we didn't make some assumptions. Let's understand the Clemson Tigers could turn out to be 3-9 this season. We don't know that. Clemson could finish 3-9. And all the assumptions we made about Clemson football would be completely wrong, mine and everybody else's. But for right now, we have a pretty good 98% certainty that Clemson is a really good football team. So we have to start with some assumptions or we can't rank anybody. The assumptions go away little by little, week after week. That's the good thing. So we get more data in each week and we can peel away the assumptions. So Iowa just went out and ripped Indiana 34-6. And we think Indiana's pretty good, and Iowa beat them 34-6. So that's an impressive performance. Again, Indiana could turn out to be a 4-win football team. We don't know. We think they're pretty good, top 25 good. Most people do. Now, Iowa goes and plays Iowa State this week. We think Iowa State's really good. Now, unlike the fabricated, false, flawed, ridiculous, stupid, senseless rankings, I'm ranking Iowa State based on what they did last week because that's all they've done. They played one game. I'm not ranking on what they did last year. That's a different football team. They got their ranking at the end of last year. I'm ranking Iowa State based on what they've done this year. They beat Iowa State 16-10. Iowa State was close to the red zone at the end of the game to win the game. So Iowa State is not ranked. Not ranked. Does that mean I believe that Iowa State is not one of the 25 best teams in the country? No, it does not. Oklahoma is not ranked. Oklahoma, I do not believe, had one of the 25 best performances in the country this past weekend, barely beating a Tulane team that is generally considered, based on the information we have, based on the evaluation, that they're probably going to be a fringe bowl team out of the American Conference. Oklahoma has not earned a ranking. Oregon has not earned a ranking. And so we've had Sooner fans and Duck fans, and who else have we dissed or disrespected or hated? I love when I get accused of hating teams because they're different than the teams that I hated last year. If Oklahoma plays well and plays like we expect them to play, this isn't going to damn them to obscurity in my rankings forever. They have 11 games in 11 weeks to come back and play like we expect Oklahoma to play, and they will be ranked accordingly. And this is a win that they had against Tulane, not a loss. There's a huge difference. They would really have to come back from that loss if they were in my rankings. Consider this. Listen to this. We see this all the time. You can go back to seasons past. If Oklahoma, think how ridiculous this is. And this underlines how ridiculous these other rankings are. If Oklahoma, starting at number 4 in the country, preseason, which is based on nothing, just based on evaluation of last year's team and who did they gain, who did they lose? And I get it. I do the same thing, but it's based on nothing that's happened this year. Number 4 team in the country coming in. If Oklahoma would have lost that game against Tulane, and again, remember, they were up 40-35. Tulane missed getting a first down by that much at midfield. Okay? Not that they would have won the game, but they would have had a first down at midfield with plenty of time left. They would have had a reasonable shot, not a puncher's chance, much better than a puncher's chance of upsetting Oklahoma. They were on a roll. They had outscored Oklahoma 21-3. You know what's amazing about these other ridiculous polls is Oklahoma, number 4 preseason. Had they lost to Tulane, they would have dropped to like 16. So Oklahoma losing at home to Tulane would have still been ranked higher than Tulane. Who beat them? That's another thing we don't do. I never rank a team behind another team who they've beaten until there is too much information and it is too complex to hold to that rule. And that happens at some point in the season, obviously. If Washington beat Oregon and Oregon beat Washington beat Oregon, Oregon beat Cal, but Cal beat Washington, one of those scenarios. So head-to-head means everything in my rankings, but obviously at some point in the season it becomes complicated in certain situations and scenarios, and then I fall back on the track record, on the entire resume. And the record, if a team beats another team, they have to have a comparable record. So just because South Carolina at 4-8 beat Georgia at 10-2 doesn't automatically vault them past everybody past Georgia. No, what I'm saying is that if I've got a 9-3 Florida team and a 9-3 Auburn team, and Florida won the game head-to-head, Florida's going to be ranked ahead of Auburn. I value the head-to-head. I know it's a novel idea that we actually count the results on the field rather than our preseason perception. All right, I'm going to get to your comments. I'm going to get to the comments on the video that are they are always disturbing to a certain extent, but then I got to realize, hey, I'm shocking some people, and it really ruffles some feathers. It's funny to watch. It is funny to watch. Who do we have in tonight? Little bit illiterate, Mark Spagnola. Mark, it's good to see you here at the Voice of College Football. Welcome in. Hummus Hero, I forgot the Ivy League played football. Sebastian Madsen, NC State, Mississippi State. I like that little game. Okay, very good. I didn't mention that game this week, but that's a decent game. Should be. Hummus Hero, big on the Alliance. H-Man 998. Hey, Mark. Go Gamecocks. There we go. South Carolina 1-0 in the books. Sebastian, yeah, I think the game will tell us how bad things really are in Lincoln. Okay. Phil B, go Knowles. Bama Boy, me and him share the same name. Okay, let's get to some comments that count. Good to see you, Tennille. Kyle Pickett. Who's going to send that first super chat? That's a great question tonight. The super chat's available. Also, keep in mind, folks, if you want to gear up for the season, get some apparel, some tailgating items, go to voiceofcollegefootball.com. I know you're used to saying the Voice of College Football, but in this case, it's just voiceofcollegefootball.com, and go to the store at the top of the screen. And hopefully someday, very soon, we will have way over there, the Voice of College Football merchandise. Soon, we're getting there. We are getting there. Voice of College Football merchandise. But for now, and thank you for that, Kyle. Appreciate your contributions over the many months. voiceofcollegefootball.com. Check it out. If you want to write for us, and I've had a few people inquire about writing for us, I would love to have more. Go to voiceofcollegefootball.com. Go to the top of the screen. It says write for us. Go in there and fill it out, and we'll be in contact. Also, yes, go to the store. Check out the gear. No pressure. You don't need to buy anything. Just check it out and see what you like. Okay? voiceofcollegefootball.com. Go to the store. Bama Boy. Robert, was there a college football game today? I wasn't paying attention. There was not. They cleared it wide open for the NFL. Alabama football fan, roll tide. Always good to see you. Encouraging everyone to hit the like button. Cheryl's here. Go Bucks. Robert, I know it's too much sense for everybody. Makes too much sense. Actually rate the teams based on what they did on the field. Can't have that. Kyle, if Mark puts FSU in the top 20, I'll give a big super chat. Well, I'm looking at my rankings right now. Did you look at my rankings, Kyle? Where did I put FSU? Looks like I got a big super chat coming. I'm looking at number 19. Number 19 in my rankings. Here it is. Florida State played Notre Dame. Notre Dame won the game. It was a close game. Went down to the wire. Obviously went to overtime. I am not taking anything else into consideration. Not that I picked Florida State to go 5-7 this year. Not that I picked Notre Dame to do as well as they did, or they've been as good as they've been the last several years. Just based on that game. That's it. So I believe I got Notre Dame at 14 and Florida State at 19. Just based on that game. That's all there is. Good to see everybody here. Yes, Robert, it's funny because people see me ranking their particular team lower than they would like. So Cincinnati has caused a lot of ire. And so I believe Cincinnati's roughly a top 10 or 15 team in the country. Something like that, in that range. I picked Cincinnati to beat Indiana this year. Now, my opinion may change when the game actually gets here, but in the preseason, I picked Cincinnati to defeat Indiana. So I think they're pretty darn good. All right. Cincinnati played Miami of Ohio. How good are they? Again, we don't know. We can generalize. We can determine to a certain degree and be fairly accurate. Miami of Ohio is not that good. Cincinnati beat them by 35 points. That's all I'm ranking them on, is based on that performance. Roman Rich, I'll admit, we, USC, would have trouble with Bama and Georgia, but the rest are soft. The rest are soft. So USC is the number 3 team in the country? Yeah. Ramon, sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly. Raymond Rich, USC should be 3rd or 4th. Okay, I got USC at 16. Played San Jose State. Took a while to get going. 130-7. San Jose State was a quality team last year. Won the Mountain West. Okay. To Neil, I trust your opinion, Mark, but I know we're number 2. Meaning number 2 in my rankings as a Georgia fan. Hey, Ben, thank you so much for that. Yeah, give a like. Please share these videos out on social media. I would appreciate it. You enjoy the live streams. Others will as well. Just let people know that we're here talking college football with everyone and all of you every day. Jude, Mark must really like UAB. Yeah, they seem to be my default random team out there. Jude's caught up with that. I do recall in the last few weeks giving a random example and saying UAB. I'm looking for some kind of like faceless team out there that everybody would just think, oh, they're okay. They're in the group of 5. They're okay. They're not UTEP bad. They're not Oklahoma. You're right, Christopher. UAB's had a very nice run in Conference USA in the past few years. Won 3 consecutive conference championships. USC would, of course, stomp Bama. Christopher's got Oklahoma in the top 5. The other funny aspect of this is that as soon as one of these teams loses and drops out of the rankings or drops in the rankings, then I'll invariably have a number of people that will say, see, I told you they weren't very good. I'm not making a prediction. Number one. Number two, yes, there are all sorts of teams in these rankings that are going to lose games because they play each other first and foremost, and then they also play teams that are just about as good as they are outside the rankings. And so this is what happens in rankings. You're not predicting the future. At least I'm not. I'm ranking the teams based on what they've done thus far. All these teams in the top 25 that I've got right now could finish 4-8. That doesn't prove anything. That doesn't prove I've got a faulty ranking system. No, I'm ranking them based on what they've done thus far. Talk is Pitt. Let's go Pitt. Okay. Well, I don't know if you heard my comment, Talk is Pitt, that there were very few good games this weekend, and I can't really put Pitt and Tennessee into some kind of marquee category, but I am interested in seeing Pitt and Tennessee play. I picked Pitt preseason to win that game. I've yet to make my predictions, which are available on Patreon. 17 cents a day right on Patreon. My picks and 20 media members. By the way, Steve Dace is off to a hot start. That shouldn't surprise anybody else. He went 11-3 against the spread last week. So you get my picks, which should be good enough. No. And then the other 19 or 20 media members, they're on Patreon. So sign up on Patreon. Just go to Patreon, search MarkRogersTV, or go to the link in the description section of any of the videos. Christopher says, Nebraska is damn good. Christopher just had a time warp moment back to 1995. I know, they don't get my top 25. They don't get it. It blows people's minds. I do enjoy when somebody tells me, and this happens usually around week 2 or 3 or 4, when somebody says, you know, Mark, I'm the one guy that told you a few weeks ago you're a complete moron, you're an idiot, but I get what you're doing and I understand and I get it. I think people just get so uptight, like Texas A&M fans. I understand if you pop open this top 25 and go, this idiot thinks we're number 17 in the country. I do not think that Texas A&M is the 17th best team in the country. I think they are better than that. I am pretty sure they're better than that. They beat Kent State 41-10 in week 1. I can easily explain how the 16 teams in front of them played better games against better opponents. That's what it's all about. There you go, return trip. OU, number 1. Talk is Pitt's got Pitt by 14 over Tennessee. I got to think that line's about, let's see, it's at Tennessee. I'm going to say about 4. Tennille's here. So, Colin, that's I do not mind being questioned. I do not mind the debate. That's why we're here. I love it. So it's not that anybody can't question or in any way debate my top 25. It's not flawless. It's not perfect. It just makes sense. Therefore, I did think about ranking Georgia number 1, Bama 2. Who had the best win in the college football season week 1? Who has the best win this season thus far? I don't think there's any question about it. There is no doubt one team is the best win in college football this year. It is the Georgia Bulldogs. They have the best win, unless we see otherwise. Maybe Clemson, this is the year that Clemson collapses, and then that is no longer the best win in college football this year. But as it stands right now, Georgia has the best win in college football. But Bama's utter dominance, complete dominance in all 3 phases against it. Had they been playing Duke and not Miami, then Georgia would have been number 1. But having played not as good a team as what Georgia played, but a top 15 to 20 team. Again, it's an estimation right now. I edged Bama over Georgia. Kyle, you can't argue with the data. Alabama football. Phew. Alabama football fan, roll tide. Always encouraging everyone to hit that like button. Well, return trip. I don't know if OU had the worst win in the country. Bo Weevil's here. Good to see you. Good to see everybody. Mark says the foundation of my top 10 disqualifies a team that is 0-1. Quality losses take a few weeks to get my recognition. Quality losses take a few weeks. So you don't appreciate a quality loss now, and about 3 weeks from now, you'll say, that was a quality loss back there in week 1. And then you recognize it. Am I getting that right? Oh, no Cal Matt. Great day to be a Stanford and Washington fan. Yes, Stanford could not score, and Washington lost to a. We discovered last weekend that Montana, their state school, has a football team. There are people out there, Return Trip is telling us, that are paying $55 to watch Oklahoma play Western Carolina. I'm hoping for you OU fans that Western Carolina gives you the kind of game that Tulane did, just so you can get your money's worth. Because if you go out there and blast them 42-0 at halftime, $55, I bet you can watch that game on YouTube cut down within hours. I would guess after that game, Shanktopotamus, this is so awkward thinking, Mark. You're going to have to explain what you're talking about, Shanktopotamus. Awkward thinking. Look at Alabama football fan roll tide. He's relentless. Tony, good to see you. I like your rankings. They make more sense because preseason rankings are BS and it takes them out. I do my best to take that out. And certainly there have been a number of times that somebody has said, Mark, you've got them at 17 and you've got them at 23. And then they make a good point. And I'll say, you know what? And typically I will be able to defend the stance that I took, but sometimes I'll admit to an oversight, or I'll say that that's a really good perspective. I understand or partially agree with what you're saying. This is why I did what I did. They're not infallible. I never said that. And a few people told me this week, well, one person in particular wrote a comment about it being an arrogant top 25. Well, if other people are giving their rankings, why is this one arrogant? Because it's different. I, again, in no way report this to be perfect. It's not perfect. Sensible. It makes sense. Return trip. I appreciate that. And you will find out if this is the first season you're watching me, that if OU takes care of business, they will be ranked. They will be ranked where they have earned their ranking. Anyone, according to Hummus here, could win the ACC this year. Jimmy wants me to preach a little bit. Somebody gives me something to get fired up to preach about. Maybe I will take some phone calls. I was going to dive in all these comments. What I truly need is some type of graphics assistant here that could type all these out, because I know they're kind of tough to follow along with at 405 comments. Okay. Muhammad is telling me it makes sense, meaning my top 25, except USC was not better than Oregon and Arizona State. Okay. I didn't make that evaluation. I made the evaluation that USC beat a San Jose State team that won the Mountain West last year at 7-1. I believe it's going to be a solid team this year, and USC beat them by 23. While Oregon only won by a touchdown over Fresno State, who is going to most likely challenge for the Mountain West as well, but USC had a more convincing win, and Arizona State played an FCS team. So, okay. Iron 44 gives me some credit here. He says it was logical until we get to the top 10, and Cincinnati damn sure shouldn't be 22. Again, I am not ranking Cincinnati as number 22 based on how good they are. They played one game. It was against Miami of Ohio. They won by 5 touchdowns. Yes, Miami of Ohio. Okay. Cincinnati continues to take care of business. They will rise in the rankings. Irish Medic says, I can actually see what you did with the top 25. I can see your thought process anyway. It still hurts, but I understand the ranking. Okay, great. Notre Dame is number 14. It's not the end of the world. They could have easily lost the game. They won. They beat. Now, see, this is where the assumption or the evaluation of the other team is a bit difficult because we know who Alabama is. They're probably the most rock solid evaluation we've got, and some other teams. Ohio State will be all shocked if Ohio State loses 4 games this year, and they're not anything close to what we thought they were. But Florida State, we could poll all of you and we could get all sorts of record predictions for Florida State that would probably range from, I've seen as low as 4-8 all the way up to 10-2. Rob says here, my Longhorns have a long way to go. I don't think we are the 6th best team in the country right now. You had the 6th best win in the country. You didn't beat the 6th best team in the country, nor are you necessarily the 6th best team in the country, but you had the 6th best win of week 1, Rob. Mr. S. Jones says, I'm a Longhorn fan. Put the Longhorns at 20 because we don't play good when we are ranked that high. Talk is Pitt says, so Rutgers plays Temple. You rank them. Why not Pitt? Pitt, you're playing Tennessee this week. Tennessee's not very good either, but it could springboard you into the top 25. That actually makes sense. It could. Okay. El Deuterino. If this was realistic, you would take into account that it's week 1. Depth of the team, recruiting rankings. The depth of the team, their talent, their coaching, recruiting rankings. I'm not ranking recruits. I'm ranking the performance on the football field. So I'm going to take recruiting classes into account here. So if the team with the 80th recruiting classes in the country that had horrible recruiting classes just goes out there and wins football games, not going to rank them very high because they didn't have good recruiting classes. If Alabama starts losing a string of football games, well, they get the number 1 recruiting classes, so I'm not going to drop them in the rankings. Okay, that's a pathetically ridiculous comment. The depth of the team will play into how well they play at some point in the season. I don't have to rank the depth of the team. The depth of the team will help determine how good they are later in the season. And that's going to be played out on the field. John, thank you. John Getz, if you are anywhere near earshot, I personally love this. It's only ranking you on how you did last week. And then this week it will change again, probably by a lot. You know what, John? Yes, it can change more early in the season than later in the season, of course, because you've got more data points later in the season. Preseason rankings suck. You don't know anything about the teams yet. Actually, these more recent comments are better than I expected. V-Botch, top 25 that actually makes sense. It's pure, it's simple, no hype, no emotion, just the facts, ma'am. Ace of Wizards, Neph Elite. By week 6 to 8, this will match up with the AP and the other polls. To a certain extent. It will continue to be more accurate in place of some of their flaws, but yes, because they will still continue to hang on to certain preseason perceptions. Believe me, they will still continue to hang on to preseason perception, AP, and coaches poll, but that gets squeezed out of them as we go. John Vogel, thanks, Mark. Appreciate that. Ralph, the voice of reason. My goodness, I must have gotten all the really sarcastic and horrible comments, critical comments early, and then just here in the last day or so, some of these nice comments. Because we've got Ralph, who's an OU fan, and he says, I'm an OU fan, and I agree. Oh, George. George is chiming in. Is George here tonight? Hey, Mark, can you do a show with Top Billin sometime? Maybe before the Ohio State-Oregon game. I would love to see how you guys feel about that. Top Billin. Don't know who that individual is. Job Johnson says, I think Utah is a sleeper team. Kurt says, I love this realistic top 25, but getting A&M at 17 hurts even if it was deserved. So again, man, a Texas A&M fan seeing me rank their team at 17, but they get the concept. You'll be fine, Texas A&M. You'll be fine. You'll be where you need to be when you continue to play. Jacob. Oh, I love to hear this. New here. This is cool. Subscribed. Stan Cooper. Mark, I love this segment you do, perhaps on the field. Performance on the field devoid of the subjective bias is a great and welcome criteria. Dre Day says, I respect your top 25. Oregon fan. Oregon fan. They're unranked. Respects my top 25. Thank you so much for that. Wow. I've got to be coming up on the shots here coming. Mr. Pokey. A better way would be to ask, who do I not want to play? I understand your point, but that's not how I'm going to rank teams. Who don't I want to play? I get it. Nobody wants to play the most talented teams, and Oklahoma would rank high in that list, but they beat Tulane by a frickin' 1 score and didn't play well. That can't be ignored. Okay, here we go. Ralph, barf. Makes no sense because you don't know who are good teams other than reputation. Everybody else that ranks has to make assumptions too. We all have to make assumptions. Hummus Hero, you're on the comments here. Talking about Cincinnati. I get it. People got a bit put off about Cincinnati. Hanzo the Razor, I do like some parts of your system. He says we should have a group of 13 to 15 people each make their own top 25. Then everyone's top 25 is totaled and the teams are ranked. Now we do a top 35 because not everyone is going to pick the same teams. The people who help all live or work. A veteran's comment there. Thank you so much for that. Hanzo. AVI. I thought AVI was a supporter. Says I'm high. A lot of people. That's the go-to for the non-creative of you out there. That's always the go-to. You're high. If I don't have something meaningful to say when I comment back to a YouTube channel, which is much of the time, I don't have anything meaningful or valuable to say, so I don't comment. I'll see something I like, something I don't like. But if I can't come up with an original thought, I back off. I don't write the proverbial "you're high." All right, what else do you folks have? Talk is Pitt wants to score for Pitt, Tennessee. Yeah, it was a good ball game. I had it on there. One scoop, John. Oh, my feed just went all the way to the bottom. I want to get this super chat in. Okay, this is what I'm going to have to do. Bear with me, everyone. I cannot post this super chat from Kyle because we got too far down the list of comments. So this is what I'm going to do. Got to give credit to this super chat coming in from Kyle. So if you hear like a big crash, you'll know that I pulled about 14 different cables and stretched them and something got dumped over. Do you guys see that? Because I can still get the little tiny little icon at the top of the screen, and I can click on that and see who gave it, but I can't post it on the screen. And Kyle says, that's cool, Mark. It is cool, Kyle. You're amazing. Thank you so much for the super chat contribution. Appreciate that so much. And I'd just like to remind everyone that we are here to do business on college football. We are here to build and build and build and build and build here at the Voice of College Football with your help. If you guys don't make it happen, it's not going to happen. So I just crank out the content and build the channel to the best of my ability, and you guys do the work of getting the word out there. So please continue to do so. Some of you have the financial resources to contribute. Others do not. And I appreciate anything I can get in regards to like the video, comment to the video, be here for the live streams, share these links out on social media. Just flat out tell people that we're here talking college football with all of you. Thank you so much, Kyle. Appreciate that so much. Many of you just started watching me maybe in the last few weeks, last few months. You don't necessarily know what we do here, but we My aim, my goal, my mission, with the help of all of you, is to talk college football constantly and provide the best content I can possible. Best discussion, debate, analysis. That's our goal. What I would like to do more on this main channel is do more analysis, analytics on national issues and national topics, conference comparisons and rankings, that sort of thing. Unfortunately, in trying to keep those other 24 channels going, so we've got an Ohio State channel, Michigan, Nebraska, Penn State, Iowa, Wisconsin, Oklahoma, Texas, USC, Oregon, Texas A&M, Alabama, LSU, Auburn, Tennessee, Florida, Georgia, Florida State, Miami, Clemson, Virginia Tech, North Carolina, Notre Dame, and an SEC channel. We've got all those. So I am basically editing till like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning every night. So I'm still not, I don't have this flowing as well as I would like, but we're getting there. We're getting there. We're getting there. And because my aim here in starting all these team channels was to move the team specific content to those team channels. And then we would do our big call-in shows here, our big live streams. This is where I would deliver, my rankings and ratings, national discussion on realignment and NIL and all those big national topics and everything nationally focused here. But when I'm editing for all those other channels constantly, then I'm not able to necessarily deliver a national topic here every day like I would like to. Bo Weevil, thank you so much. And again, Kyle, I will never be able to accurately or sufficiently thank you and everybody else that contributes in so many different ways. Cheryl, thank you for all that you do. I hope you're still around. I thank you so much for all that you do. Oh man, had I had that tip at that point. I remember this might have been about 6-7 years ago. A lady at work said that she had bought Bitcoin. And I'm just kind of making up the numbers because I don't remember the conversation perfectly, but it was something like she had bought Bitcoin at $50 and it was at 600 or 1,000. And she was like, what do I do with this? And I'm like, I just heard of this like a few weeks ago. I don't know. Kyle, you should tell me what to do with my Bitcoin right now. I just bought it around 45,000. And some Ethereum. Got that recently. It has been a rough year in the stock market, though. Hey, Joseph. How you doing? This is the first time I've seen your name. I apologize if I'm forgetting something, but welcome to the Voice of College Football. Would love to know how long you've been watching and who you root for. Swampy McGee's here. All right. Tony is saying, hold on to Bitcoin until 2025 at least. Ethereum still going to 10 times by next year. Thank you. I don't know when to let go of Dogecoin. I bought that at 10 cents. It's around a quarter. It went up to about 75 cents. Most of the estimations I saw said it was going to go to $1. XRP. Turn this into a financial show tonight. No, we won't. No, we won't. Don't worry. We won't. Let's open up the phone lines. 860-499-3332. We talk college football all the time. ETH2 will make ETH explode. XRP. Okay, we'll look at that, Elias. What have I missed? Hip hop R&B lover, I apologize that our USC channel is lacking. So out of all those channels, most of them were cranking out the content pretty well. A few of them are kind of, I don't want to say they're dying. They're not dying. They're just a bit stagnant, and USC is one of them. So just for you hip hop R&B lover, I know you love your USC Trojans. We will try to get on that in a much better fashion. I can't find any USC contributors. That's the problem. Christopher is telling us that the football power index works pretty well as far as positioning. Maybe. I don't know. I made the comment the other day that I would just like it to be reported what the football power index predicted probabilities on these games, and that they would archive their statistics. They disappear into the ether after the game. So you can't go back and say, you know what? The FPI said Clemson was a 58% pick to beat Georgia. Well, Georgia won the game. So we at least can go back and look. No, the FPI information disappears. And so unless somebody's out there tracking the FPI, we don't know how accurate it is. Andrew, need to get you a med card, sir. Exploring with Ben. Let's go Ducks. Can't wait for what should be a good game this weekend. We've got some really good Oregon content late this week to deliver right before the big game. Had Mike Black on from Fifth Quarter College Football. Had Ryan Winter on from Sports Chat 503 just a few hours ago. I'm posting those videos. So check out, and we did an Oregon live show. We also, of course, talked Oregon during the Ohio State live show. Maybe I'll post that on the Oregon channel tomorrow. Texas rocks. Maybe I'll start a GoFundMe. But we need a specific GoFundMe effort. Like if I needed, the next time I need some large piece of equipment, maybe I'll go that route. I'm not going to just do a GoFundMe so you guys can pay for my electric bill. But Kyle, thank you so much for that. Eric, with this is a question that I've never quite been able to answer, although I've thought about it. Just thought about it so much. What is the best stadium to take a number 2 in on game day? We know who the classy ones are here. Chris, Mark Rogers, how you doing? What a game with Dallas, Tampa Bay. Yeah, classic. Yep, it's a good one. If I missed anything, old Toby. If I fall on my head, my common sense will come back. Well, if I give that a shot, yeah, we'll have to try that. Andy Case, hey, Mark, what programs recaps do you have set for Saturday? Oh, my goodness, Andy. Thank you so much for the super chat contribution. Listen to this. On Saturday, we even have 4 pregame shows on Saturday. So early in the morning, for those of you who like to get up at the crack of dawn, or knowing some of you, you'll still be up from the night before, maybe like myself, we are going to have live hits from College Game Day in Iowa early in the morning on Saturday. I will not be up at that time, but our guy, Corey Bratta, is going to be providing us with live hits from College Game Day site in Iowa, right here on the main channel, early Saturday morning. Also on Saturday morning, We've got a live show coming from the Virginia Tech Middle Tennessee pregame, courtesy Paul Van Wagner and Mike McDaniel. Now, you may say, Virginia Tech and Middle Tennessee. Are you serious? Okay. Our guys Paul and Mike are providing Virginia Tech pregame before every game, and Middle Tennessee is one of the games. So it's a game, but these guys are so freaking entertaining. Forget that they're playing Middle Tennessee. This is going to be a good listen. I listened to their pregame and postgame on my channel last week, and it was phenomenal. So Paul and Mike with Virginia Tech and Middle Tennessee pregame at 9 o'clock in the morning on Saturday. We've got an SEC show at 11 a.m. on the SEC channel before the noon games. And then Jason on the Oklahoma channel will be doing OU pregame. I don't know what time. They're playing a night game. Okay. Post game, Andy, this is what we've got. I'm going to jump on here after the Ohio State-Oregon game and take some of your calls, some of your comments, lead you into the 3:30 Eastern time game. And then I'm going to direct you to the Ohio State channel, and we're going to have Ohio State post-game with Ori, and we will simulcast that on the Ohio State, Oregon, and Big Ten channels. And then we've got throughout the day, just check out the game times. We've got post-game of Florida, South Florida on the SEC and the Florida channels. We've got Middle Tennessee and Virginia Tech right here on the main channel, post-game for that. We've got post-game for Notre Dame Toledo right here and on the Notre Dame channel. We've got Georgia UAB post-game on the SEC and the Georgia channels. We've got Texas A&M Colorado post-game on the SEC and the Texas A&M channels. We've got Buffalo and Nebraska post-game on the Nebraska channel. Ball State and Penn State play, and we've got the post-game for that on the Penn State and the Big Ten channels. Mercer and Alabama should be a good one. We've got Bama post-game on the Alabama channel. We've got Iowa State. Okay, that's huge. That's going to be on the main channel right here. That's going to be on the Iowa channel and on the Big Ten channel post-game. Post-game of Western Carolina, Oklahoma, of course, on the Oklahoma channel. Miami and Appalachian State could be a decent game. Miami's only a 8-point favorite. I was a bit surprised by that. We've got Miami App State post on the Miami channel. We've got Texas and Arkansas post. I am watching that game. Texas and Arkansas post on the Texas channel. LSU McNeese State post game on the SEC channel. Washington, Michigan on the Michigan channel. I'm definitely going to watch that game as well. And Florida State, Jacksonville State on the FSU channel. Got all that? You don't need to get all that because I'll be posting that schedule a number of times throughout the week. Swampy and Empire. Jokingly, I've called that a few times. I've got some buddies that I've known, especially a couple buddies of mine from ESPN. They know who they are. Kevin, Marty, guys are the best. Neither one of them are up. I can guarantee that. But, you know, we've joked and talked about this for a long time. I've told the story before, and I'll tell it in condensed form. I was doing digital media for ESPN. This was back in like 2008 or 9 as a freelancer. I had my regular job at ESPN, but I was doing some work as a freelancer where I was doing voiceovers for highlights, and I was doing anchor lead-ins on ESPN.com. And my buddy Marty saw it, and he's like, Mark, what are you doing? Start a YouTube channel. So I did. And so they will ping me every so often with a text. They call me all the time. We used to hang out all the time, but now obviously I'm here, and one of them still at ESPN. Marty's doing his own thing, but we're still in constant contact. And they throw out stuff like that all the time. Mark's building the empire. Mark's prolific. It's kind of a joke. It's kind of a running joke. They love to talk up the channel. Does Arkansas have a good quarterback? Andrew, for a more exhaustive answer, check out the video that I'm posting in the morning with Ty Hudson from Pig Trail Network. But I will tell you that KJ Jefferson got valuable playing time the last 2 years. He's a decent quarterback. He's a running quarterback who ran for almost 100 yards and 2 touchdowns against Rice. As a thrower, inconsistent. Is he a good quarterback? He will be the second best quarterback on the field against Texas. Hudson Card in his second start will be a better quarterback than KJ Jefferson. Swampy McGee, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Joseph, Mark, you do a hell of a job at putting out all the great content that you do. For only being one person, you put out better content and discussions than a lot of bigger networks. The Voice. Thank you so much for that, Joseph. I appreciate that. And I really want to put out better and more quality content. Some of the content that I put out, I will be very honest in saying I am not completely proud of. So I would, just looking at the set, we want a better set, better looking set. We want better lighting. We want better, I would like to be able to, polish up the videos with better graphics, with more pictures, video, that sort of thing. But that takes time. And right now I'm just cranking out the content. But we would like to polish it up and make it better. After working in television for 30 years, believe me, I know how to polish it up. I know what looks good and what doesn't, and what is good. I just don't have the time to do it. So right now it's cut and paste and send it out there. One Scoop, John, thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. I enjoy the conversation with Steve Dace every Tuesday. It is very nice of him to invite me on his show. Steve Dace doesn't need to do that. Steve Dace can carry a conversation all by himself for hours. And I say that because I'm partially making fun of him because he knows he's a big mouth, and that's why he's got a phenomenal radio career and background and podcasting career going forward. He's a big mouth, but I say that in such a way that it's also very insightful, very knowledgeable. The perspective, the storylines, the narrative that he puts together is phenomenal. I've said this once or twice on here. Steve Dace is the only person that I come on here with, whether he's on my show, on my channel, or I'm over on Michigan Podcast, that I just don't roll out of bed thinking I'm just going to start talking. He is the one guy that makes me think, okay, I got to pull it together. I got to sound reasonable, or he's going to make me look like a fool and he's going to run circles around me. So I got to be up to the challenge. I've got to be on my game. He is the only person, with all due respect to everybody else that comes on. They are not necessarily professional broadcasters. So with everybody else, if you guys could see me half the time, about 5 minutes before I come on, I'm still sleeping. Like, I will set the alarm for 9:50 if I'm going to do a record at 10 sometimes, and just roll out of bed and start talking. But not with Steve Dace. So Steve Dace can carry a podcast all by himself. So for him to honor me with the invitation every week to go on his Michigan podcast, I appreciate that so much. So, Joseph, thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. The 10-Minute War. Catch it on Michigan Podcast, the 10-Minute War with Steve Dace. He opens with a segment, brings me on. Then we move on from there. Eric, I as well enjoy Joel Klatt. Does a great job. I have pinged Joel Klatt on Twitter a few times. I don't know that that's the most... It's not been the most successful way. I don't know if it's the most effective way, or there would be other ways to get in touch with Joel Klatt to come on. I would love to do that. But I've hit him up a few times. If any of you follow me on Twitter and you see me reach out to a big time dude on Twitter, You know what's going to get their attention? If you like it and retweet it or comment to say, hey, Joel, would love to see you on Mark's show. That's what they're going to respond to. They're not going to respond to me asking them on. I would say the most well-known people we've had on here would be Phil Steele, Jerry DiNardo. I'm forgetting. Actually, the more well-known people we've had on were earlier when I had a lot less subscribers. I would every so often, I would reach out to more well-known people, bring them on. Yeah, Dennis, would love to have those ESPN graphics. I would love for this to be a glossier show. Let me get the phone lines. They are open. Let me get the number up there. So we're at 860-499-3332. I'm going to move that to the ticker, 860-499-3332. Some of you have purchased from TriStateWoodsketch.com. I appreciate that. I know that because our friend over there, Joey, has told me that many of you have said that you were sent by the voice of college football, TriStateWoodsketch.com. I believe I need to change that graphic. I don't want to get Joey in trouble. I believe that's 10% off. He updates that every so often, and I don't pay too much attention. A couple times he's had these intricate kind of deals, and he's updated them, and I've been like, Joey, I'm sorry. I can't keep up with your changing conditions. So I do believe that that's now 10% off when you tell them the Voice of College Football sent you, and look at that. Now, you could order that if you'd like. If you would truly like that, I'm sure anybody else living in your house would be like, who's this knucklehead? But this is just a sample of how quality the work is. So you send Joey a photo to TriStateWoodsketch.com, and you select your surface, and they make magic happen. And tell them the Voice of College Football sent you. All right, we got a call coming in. Let's get to it. Hey, welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, this is
Hey,
Ben.
Ben. I am doing well. How are you?
Hey, I wanted to mention, you were talking about all the people you're having on the show.
Hello,
I really enjoyed the, I'm sorry, can you still hear me?
Time out, Ben. Give me just a second.
Okay.
I thought the last time I ran this through the monitor and it worked. I'm going to have to put my earpiece on. My apologies. I had this set up differently to where I hate putting the earpiece in. Give me just a second, Ben. Hang on.
Okay.
There we go. Hey, Ben, I got you. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I just wanted to tell you, man, I really enjoyed the Iowa guys going at it. Iowa and Iowa State guys the other night.
Yeah,
that was a really fun broadcast. That was yeah, your channel is just, I mean, I love what you're doing with it. It's great. I mean, you got all these other people that I would have known to looked up, and it's been great to look to go through your channels and see these other guys that just like people keeping track of like recruiting and all that kind of stuff. It's just endless wealth of college football knowledge there.
Thank you so much for that, Ben. I appreciate that. We are hoping
to
do even better. Yep.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. I also, I found you through Steve Dace, and he's great. I also seen you had a podcast with Josh Pate is his name, from
yes.
247 Sports. I like his show too. It's great. But anyways, what I was calling tonight for, is one suggestion I want to throw out at you is for your top 25. Is there a way you can like make a link to like a graphic?
Yeah, how should I do that? Well, you know what I'll do is yeah, I could put up a graphic.
Or
Or
even
would I
like
do
it's
that?
just like
Because
a web link, even
you understand that I want people to watch the video, but I guess after it's out a couple days, it doesn't really matter. So you want a graphic, so
just
so you
especially
know
for
the
this
top
show.
25. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, I mean, I don't have that, all in my head or anything like that. But
Sure.
I did see you left Michigan out. Were they close to the 25 in your opinion?
Michigan is in the top 25. See, I've got it right here. Give me just a second. Michigan is number 20.
Oh, I didn't notice that. Maybe I just missed that part of the show. That's all I was asking. I was wondering why they're out and why you left them out, but I was wrong about that. So I guess I'll let somebody else call. And
we're talking.
Hey, I like your top 25.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad that you grasp it. Is this the first time you've been with us during a season?
Well, I kind of caught a little bit of it back and forth last season. I probably started at the beginning, maybe even before, maybe the year before, maybe I think it was 2018. I started watching your show a little bit here and there.
I do understand when people see it for the first time, they think I'm out of my mind.
Yeah, you seem a little defensive about it. Seems like you get a lot of flack for it, but later on in the season, it definitely starts to make a lot more sense.
Yes, I think it makes sense from the day one, but that's me. But I
mean, I understand. I understand what the one person who was talking about, like power rankings and things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand where it's coming from, but I mean, if you did it completely without any bias, you would have to. Every team's at a 0, so you're going to have to go by complete score. I mean, by stats and point spreads.
Well, sure.
And then it would, you could only go by the highest point spread because everybody's a 0. And so, if let's say Temple beats or Rutgers beat Temple by how many? They're going to be way up there. They could have been the number one they could have been number one going by that metric. So you have to. I think anybody that's reasonable understands that you have to start somewhere. There has to be some bias.
Yeah, there has to be some assumption made. Exactly. Or we would just say either these are the teams that won, these are the teams that lost. So all these teams that won are tied for number 1 in the country, and all the teams that lost are tied for number 65 in the country. Or like you said, just go to a point differential and the team that won by the most points in week 1, because we can't assume how good anybody is. So Rutgers win against Temple's the same as Georgia's win against Clemson, because we can't assume anything. Therefore, Rutgers beat Temple by 47 points, so they're number 1 in the country, and Georgia only beat Clemson by a touchdown, so they might be down to number 28 in the country.
Exactly. Yeah, but I think most people, but I guess I could see if you're coming new on it and you don't know anything about it, being like, well, what is this guy talking about? So yeah, I can understand the being defensive about it.
Yeah, Ben, that's been going way back. Been one of the premises to this entire channel has been, let's not just take what the groupthink national media tells us to be the gospel truth. Let's look beyond that. And so another thing you'll see I will do during the off season is I'll do conference rankings, not based on what everybody else tells us how good the conferences are, but let's actually look at the results on the field. And not just, I think I came up with this idea watching ESPN during the bowl season, they'll show their bowl cup, and they'll say that Conference USA is 3-5, and the Big Ten's 4-6, and the SEC 7-2, and then they'll just leave it at that. And I'll be like, well, who did these teams play? And so what I do at the end of the season is I take all the games that are played between Power 5 teams, and I seed all the conferences. I seed all the teams in the conferences, and therefore I come up with a statistical formula that rates each win, and then I can give a metric to not just the record, but the weightiness of the record of every conference against the other 4 major conferences.
Yeah.
I like to do things like that. I like to push back if I think it's reasonable against what seems to just be common groupthink that, well, this is what we think because this is what we've always heard, or this is what we're being told.
Yeah, and I mean, I watch ESPN, and it's obvious ESPN's biased to the SEC. The SEC, their off-season conference most of the time, I think in general, they're like out of conference games tend to be weaker, even though they're powerful conference. Oftentimes when I look at particular teams like Alabama, Georgia, they won't have a very difficult schedule, even being from the SEC, compared to say Ohio State, when they're not playing like maybe a number 2, but they're playing Michigan, Wisconsin, Penn State, all in one season. And I think it gets kind of unfair as far as ESPN and some of their rankings are, because I think SEC definitely gets a little bit of extra credit where I don't always necessarily think they deserve it.
Yeah, the first time that really hit me was in 2006 when Florida killed Ohio State in the national championship game. And ESPN and other outlets, but they're the leader. They're the network of college football, especially at that time. They just went on and on and on about how the SEC was the best conference. Well, maybe the SEC was the best conference, but just a few days prior to Florida beating Ohio State, the Big Ten won 2 other bowl games against the SEC, and those were completely disregarded. And just because the top teams in those conferences played and there was a certain result, well, then the rest of the conference took on that narrative, and it was just so generic and so lazy just to say, well, because the SEC won the national championship game and they beat Ohio State that badly, then that reflected on the entire conference and wiped out, all the other games played. I just hate stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. And I don't know, but I kind of last year, I didn't quite watch it. I didn't watch college football all that much last year. I mean, there wasn't a lot to watch, but the years passed. I remember like the Big Ten and Big Ten guys, like the beginning of the year, like majority of the out of conference games were won from the Big Ten. This year, I think so far out of the, I know it's only one week, but I think Illinois is the only team out of the Big Ten that played an out of conference game that lost. I think Illinois. Yeah, that's correct. I can't think of another. Yeah, Illinois is the only one that lost out of conference this week, right?
Yes. Maryland beat West Virginia. Rutgers beat Temple. And most of the rest of the conference played conference games.
Yeah, like Michigan played,
Michigan played Western Michigan.
Just a MAC team. Yeah, MAC team. And I think there was like 5. But, and that narrative doesn't, and I've seen that happen, and not even just in the Big Ten, but I think, it sticks in my mind the most. I've seen that happen many times, and then it just kind of goes in the background until as the season progresses, and it just kind of left. And that's what's really nice about the way you do your top 25, because you take that kind of thing into account.
Yeah, we try. We most certainly try. Anything else tonight,
All right,
Ben?
Mark. Well, no, that's it. I was going to let you go. And yeah, enjoy I'm looking forward to college football, watching your content. I can't wait, and I'll spread the word, man.
Awesome.
You have a good night.
Thank you so much for that, Ben. And I'm getting the top 25 on the screen as we speak.
Oh, cool. Great. I see it. All right. Have a good night.
Thanks, Ben. Good to hear from Ben. And let me get this out of the way. And get that out of the way. There we go. And we got a call coming in here. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, this is Eric.
Hey, Eric. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good. What's going on?
Yeah, same old, same old. Watching your stuff. I got notifications on, so I know when you go live.
I
always love to participate.
Thank you.
I watched your video this morning with Steve Merrill, and I'm in touch with him. And I thought that was excellent. I loved listening to him and you discuss some betting lines. But I called to, I don't know, ask a couple general things. First, we know, at least to a certain extent, college football is cyclical. You see programs like Nebraska and USC, maybe FSU and others that I'm forgetting, kind of struggling with their identities. How are we losing Miami when in the 90s or early 2000s or 80s we were really, really good? So I guess the hypothetical is, if we're starting a new cycle now, or, you know, in 10 years, who would you say has fallen to irrelevancy? I mean, it's hard to imagine Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State doing that. But at the time, no one thought Nebraska or Miami, no one thought Nebraska would be losing to Illinois in week 1. So that's just first thing, open-ended, no real point. Just wanted to hear your thoughts.
It's a great question. And the first thing I think of when it comes to projecting how various programs are going to do going forward, the first thing that I think of is population shift and recruiting. Because I think that even though the ACC is down, that the ACC does have a opportunity, excuse me, to maybe not catch the SEC, because the SEC has the best recruiting footprint, but the ACC obviously overlaps it, and people are moving south and people are moving west. And so universities excel in football because of where they're located, but they also excel because they're committed. They're committed to winning in football, and you've got to be fully committed. I've heard Dabo Swinney make the comment, and other coaches, that there was a decision made at some point from the top to go from being a good football playing school that puts a lot of money into it, a lot of effort, a lot of resources, to a fully committed situation where there is an objective, a mission set out that we are going to excel at football. We are going to compete at the very highest level, and we are going to put tons of money into it, tons of resources. We are going to be the best. So I think that commitment needs to come from the top of the administration first and foremost. It helps to play in the South or in the West, most notably in the South, because Texas and Florida are the two best football playing states. California used to be right there with them, but it's dropping, and Georgia's vying for a third place. So that's a huge advantage. Therefore, that's why it's been difficult for schools in the North outside of Ohio State, and to a lesser degree Notre Dame and Penn State, to keep up. So that would be my general thought about who can compete or who can elevate their status in the next 10 years?
I think that's brilliant. So hypothetically, if I told you that in 5 years, USC, UCLA, I don't know. I mean, it could even be a Big 12 team. Oklahoma State and Georgia swapped positions in terms of, and people are going to say I'm high right away. But if that happened, how would you think that to be possible in the next 5-10 years?
So you just said if USC, UCLA, and who?
If a program like USC or UCLA or Oklahoma State suddenly, or not suddenly, rather over 5 to 10 years, swapped places in that hierarchy of college football with a team like Oklahoma or Georgia or I don't even know, North Carolina or Clemson, would that be surprising to you? And I kind of asked because you've watched this sport a lot longer than I have. I go off a 15-year sample size. You're going off a 30 years. So just wanted to hear from your experience.
Well, Eric, I hate to admit it, but I'm going more off of about 43 or 44, more than 30.
Well, I love that. That's what I'm dealing with here. That's what I'm talking with.
To the late 70s. So
however you feel talking with the guy you mentioned, I mean, those roles are reversed now. I got to plan this out before I call.
Well, I want you to be comfortable calling here, so I appreciate that approach, but definitely don't think of it that way. So I will start out by saying, if you grabbed a preseason publication at any year during the 1980s, and you grabbed Athlon, Street and Smith on down the line, from year to year, those top 15 teams in the country would be all over the place. Like it was nothing like it's been for the last 7 or 8 years, where you would always see Ohio State, Clemson, Georgia, Alabama, and those teams in the top 5 or 6 in the country. You saw Ohio State ranked 5th one year in the preseason, 18th the next year, Michigan jumping up. You could go to any conference, and over the span of a decade, half of that conference would have won the conference championship during that decade. During the decade of the 80s, Illinois won the Big Ten multiple times. Michigan State, Iowa, Ohio State, of course, and Michigan. Anybody else in the Big Ten? Those would be the 5 schools that won the Big Ten in the 80s. And you could do that with every conference. There was just more parity. And so when you talk about, to me, USC, UCLA, there's obviously a common thread there. Now, when you take Oklahoma State, I think you're just taking schools that are generally 8-4, 9-3 kind of teams. Is that the reason you selected those 3? Because Oklahoma State's in a much different place than USC and UCLA. I have always thought that UCLA was a sleeping giant. I never understood why they could not win consistently in football.
Well, I'm a bit more focused on the Pac-12 here, and UCLA. I mean, it's a great school. They shouldn't have any trouble recruiting in general with the talent around them. But what I see, and I could be totally wrong, is that UCLA is not a big brand. And you were talking about this earlier with programs making a decision from the top down to prioritize football. And I mean, UCLA is overshadowed by USC in the same city, and Oregon in the north, Washington in the north. Even like, I don't even know, Cal. I mean, I know UCLA looks good right now. We have that recency bias. But that's what I would say is what kind of holds them back. And this is something we're discussing about Washington right now too, is that Washington has been on the decline because they're prioritizing academics, which is nothing I ever want to demonize. In Oregon classrooms, I would hear professors complain about how much money we are directing towards sports. And I don't want to get political, but I just wanted to emphasize that conversation about fully investing in football is a real one that's going on. And I think UCLA and Washington are going more the Stanford route in general. And I think that Oregon has made that decision. It's felt that way. I don't know if they're 100% on that decision or they're like an 80, 90% lukewarm. But especially with the new Pac-12 commissioner, I'm hopeful that we have jumped on the train.
So here's my thought about UCLA in particular. I'll put Oklahoma State to the side because I think they're in a much different situation than the other schools we're talking about. USC obviously has committed itself in the past to football and has been a football school. UCLA traditionally a basketball school, but the reality of that obviously goes back decades for UCLA in basketball. They have not been that great in that sport for quite some time, even though they just went to a Final Four. So it's always been my thought, okay, why can UCLA not win consistently in football, even though they did from the time I started watching in the late 70s for about the next 10 years, they were consistently in the Rose Bowl and finishing in the top 10 to 15 in the country at that time. Because I thought, number one, especially at that time, statistically, your top 40% of high school football players are located in Florida, Texas, and California. 40% of the top 300 players in the nation come from those three states. And California wasn't in third place necessarily. They were right there in the running with Texas and Florida for having the best talent. And generally that talent stayed home and went to USC, and some of it went to UCLA, but about 80% went to USC, at least out of the ones that went to USC or UCLA. And that's become an issue going forward, is that, number one, for whatever reason, I don't know what it is, the caliber of play of high school football in California is declining. It's still a great football playing state, but I've looked at the numbers over the past couple of years, and in regards to blue chip recruits and percentages of blue chip recruits, Georgia has eclipsed California for the first time. And so where 10 years ago, California was arguably the best in the country, now it's like fourth or fifth. And then even some of those preeminent players, more of them are choosing to leave. Consider that Bryce Young's the starting quarterback at Alabama, and he's a Los Angeles kid. So is DJ Uiagalelei at Clemson. He's a California kid. Who else am I thinking of? There's somebody else prominent out there.
There's Thibodeau and Flo on Oregon.
Well, yeah,
both from LA.
I was thinking of another quarterback, but yeah, exactly. The Ohio State quarterback, CJ Stroud's from San Diego.
Yeah. I mean, and it's I don't know, you kind of have a chicken and egg situation there. Like, California universities aren't performing as well at the collegiate level, so the high schools aren't performing at the same level, or it's the other way around. Obviously they're related, right? So you do see Oregon poaching USC. You obviously see the SEC poaching California, everyone. But there actually, in the last couple of days, there have been some interesting comments, or I've heard them about, Tua saying that he wished Oregon had offered him and they never did. And there's, I don't know if he's a wide receiver. I'm kind of bad with the Ohio State crew still. I think it's a wide receiver. Maybe it was Olave or
Chris
Wilson.
Olave.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's Olave.
That said that he also wanted to be recruited by Oregon, but was never offered. And so there, I'm not disagreeing with what you said. I just think it's interesting that there is still some pull to the West Coast. I don't really think it's coming from UCLA though.
So I hate to admit that this slogan may actually mean something, but when the SEC says that it just means more there, I think that's another thing that these recruits see when they go to these schools in the SEC and to a lesser extent in the Big Ten. There are less of them in the Big Ten, but certainly Ohio State's as committed to winning in football as anybody in the country. So what they see is that the fan bases are rabid. Now, I'm not discounting that Oregon has rabid fans and USC has rabid fans. Every school has rabid fans, but not where you can pack 100,000 into a stadium every week for a game against a MAC team. So you don't, when they see that level of fervor and they see that they can be something important at a school and something important in that state and in that region, number two, also that those schools are dedicated to winning, therefore they're pumping facilities. You know, we've heard this, and I don't know this firsthand from visiting campus, but that places like UCLA don't have nearly the facilities that any school in the SEC has, aside from Vandy. The recruits have to see that so and so's pumping all this money into its football facility, and I can dress every day in this like luxurious accommodation that just blows everybody away. It's just obvious that they care more and they put the resources.
So where does Oregon rank in that? Because I know the SEC as a conference cares more than the Pac-12, or it means more. I totally get that. I'm painfully aware that Austin is 60,000, still super loud, super awesome crowd, but you know, the Horseshoe is 103, or there's 110,000 people in stadiums over there, and it is wild. And I watch the videos and get goosebumps. But so it's conferences, obviously. Is Oregon, are their facilities, the amount of money they pump into it, where would they rank in the SEC, or compared to Oklahoma? Are they top 10? Are they even that in terms of investment and how much it means?
That is a great question, because this is what it leads me to. If you ever look at the recruiting rankings, you see that the SEC owns 12, let's say, of the top 25 spots in the nation. So think about that. You're the 25th best recruiting class in the nation, but you're 12th in the SEC. Therefore, what's going to happen? If those recruiting rankings come to fruition, you're going to go 1-7, 2-6 in the SEC, but you're going to have the 25th best team in the country. Now, obviously, we know that other things are impactful to that rating and how it translates to the field, but basically that's the biggest component to winning, is the talent acquisition. So what that leads me to is that that's the amount of time and attention and money that's given to those programs, again, except for Vandy. And other than that, in the SEC, they all go full throttle. Even Mississippi State and Ole Miss, they go full throttle and do as much as they possibly can for what they have to win. The problem comes in that not everybody can be successful. So if we were in some other industry or some other business where multiple people can be successful, or everybody can share in the wealth, but that's not the case in competitive athletics. Somebody has to lose the game. So regardless of if everybody in the SEC is building ridiculous facilities and spending gobs of money, well, they play every week, so somebody's got to be a failure, regardless of how much money they spend. So there has to be a loser out there. Now, if you compare Oregon to what we see in the SEC, I believe that, and you gotta realize I'm spitballing this because, you know, I read, I soak things up, but this hasn't been something I've really focused on, is comparing facilities. And we know that in years past that Oregon has put together some phenomenal facilities. They were one of the first that I think really caught attention in building state-of-the-art facilities that really were extravagant. So I don't know where that arms race is right now, but I think, based on everything I know and documentaries that I've seen that have taken the tours through the football facilities, that Oregon's facilities rank as well as anybody's in the country. At least they did at one point. And again, it's an arms race where they are constantly upgrading. And if your facility's 4 years old and you haven't touched it yet, well, you better get to work and put a slide in, or another arcade, or whatever you need to do to keep up with it. But I can't give you an accurate rating on Oregon. I know that I've watched the videos and seen shows where they've taken us through the facility, and at one point it was considered one of the very best.
Well, yeah, I mean, it has to be, and in that way I somewhat answer my own question, but just spitballing is what I wanted to hear. Most of the time, that's what I want to hear, right? I don't want to hold anyone. I like the conjecture and guesswork about the sport, and the incredible amount of analysis that goes along with it, of course. But Oregon has to be on that tier because they know they're recruiting against, oftentimes, Alabama or USC or Ohio State. So it has to be there. I mean, just by looking at the recruiting rankings, it can't not be. Otherwise, we wouldn't be landing these kids. It's just old money versus new money, I suppose, in college football. In any case, I always appreciate talking to you. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I always get irritated when I have to wait to chat. So I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Hey, thanks for the call. We appreciate it. Have a good night.
Yeah, thank you.
Next up on the Voice of College Football, who's on the line?
Hey, Mark. This is Exploring with Ben.
Hey, what's going on, Ben?
Hey, not much. Actually, I was really enjoying the last caller. A lot of his questions are, thought provoking and made a lot of sense too, though. Because I was actually really taking in depth your answers to him and his questions, because it is an interesting topic about how teams, the circular motion of college football, so to say, especially over the last 15 years.
Yeah, the last point I make, I don't really hear people talking about, and there's no way around it, and it's the industry that we are watching, and that's competitive athletics. So, for example, if you want to go be a famous actor, or if you had a dozen people that wanted to go be a famous actor, well, they all could rise to a certain level depending on their own abilities and how many opportunities they were able to get. But within competitive athletics, somebody has to lose. Even if everybody's doing their jobs and busting their tails and doing everything they possibly can, somebody's got to be, half the teams have to be a loser every week. So they failed in the test. The test is every Saturday, and that is the culmination of all the hard work and all the sweat and all the tears and the facilities and the money and the recruiting, and all of it comes down to 3 hours on the football field, and half the teams every Saturday lose. Regardless of how well they do what they do, somebody's got to lose. And that's what I think is.
I mean,
and I was just going to say that's what I think is unique about the industry. It's not like if we were all taking a history class in college and we all learned the material and took the test, we can all get a 95. But you can't do that in college football or in competitive athletics. Somebody has to lose.
Well, exactly. And like he was saying, he was asking about, how did certain teams fall off the map over years? And it's like, I think it takes, 1 to 2 years maybe of being significant, and that university or alumni say, we're going to invest to build this and continue it. And I think it takes an approach, but also it takes coaching and staff. Because, I mean, I'm an Oregon Ducks fan, and Oregon was irrelevant for many years until, their first Rose Bowl appearance in like 15 to 20 years in 95.
Yeah. Then
they were irrelevant for 5, 6 more years. Then they probably should have gone to the national championship in 2000, 2001, but they had one loss. They got kind of snubbed on it. Then they were irrelevant again for a few years, and then they started building back up, and then Chip Kelly took over. And I think at that point, just money kept getting dumped into the program going, let's build this. And so I think that's where with USC getting sanctions, that's where USC started falling off. Pete Carroll left, coaching, stuff like that. And it takes just a shift in money, coaching staff, and fan base, I think, overall. Yeah, and that's where programs start to kind of shift a little bit. Sometimes more dramatically than others, but
yeah, there's a lot that plays into it. No doubt about it. And it's constantly changing anywhere but at the top. It's not changing at the top, and it hasn't for quite some time, but it's changing in the other tiers of football, in the other tiers from 1 to 130. I've made this comment a number of times in recent months that I noticed in looking at the major publications in the off season that they tend to barely tweak the records of all the teams in the nation in their predictions. So I routinely would go through Athlons and Lindy's and Street and Smith's, and I would see where maybe only 3 teams out of the entire Power 5, they would significantly change their record from the previous season and predict a sudden rise or fall. And so I thought, is that accurate? And so what I did, I went 3 consecutive years, and I went through the entire Power 5, and I determined, okay, this is going to be my criteria for dramatic change is going to be 3 wins or 3 losses, meaning if you go from 6-6 to 9-3, I consider that a substantial upgrade, or you go from 6-6 to 3-9, a 3-game increase or decrease in wins is significant. And while those publications were being very conservative in their predictions and only predicting 3 or 4 teams a year to substantially improve or decline, anywhere from 18 to 23 teams in the Power 5 each year either improve or decline by 3 games. 18 to 23 out of 65. So roughly a third of the teams this season we can expect to be 3 games better or worse than they were last year. Of course, last year is an aberration because of the pandemic and not all the games being played. So you really can't take last year, for example. But that shows you that there is more flux within the sport than many people believe that there are. It's just that the top is so stable. The elite is so stable, but everything else is in flux.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and that's it. I don't blame any ranking records or whatever saying like, oh, we expect, for instance, just say Alabama to go, oh, it was 10-2 or plus, better, because to be honest, they had a comment earlier about on some different networks and shows and stuff about Nick Saban getting riled up with the media, which he always does every year, telling them off about how complimenting his players. And I'm like, I don't know, somewhat of a show, but at the same time, I think that's what makes him such a great coach, is because he tells his players, be modest, work hard, suck it up, and perform all the time. And I think that's kind of what makes him, as much as everyone maybe dislikes him to a degree, that's what makes him a good coach. Because look at all of his staff changes, all his player changes. Nonstop, continues to win. So I don't blame medias for, not dropping Alabama to a degree. Because, what's the worst Nick Saban record his first year there?
His worst record would be, yes, his first season was 7-6. After that, his worst record was 10-3 in 2010.
And since then, it's been pretty consistent, 10+ wins.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's been the epitome of consistency to a degree. And I think that's what makes him that way. Is like, he doesn't want to, whether that was learning from NFL or just years of coaching previously, whatever it was, I don't know. Maybe he just felt the mold of Alabama, but it's worked. I watched some of your stuff with, your Oregon stuff. What do you think? Because I know everyone says like, oh, Ohio State's going to blow out Alabama or blow out Oregon, which, I mean, I'm optimistic. I'm hoping it's a close game. I'm not expecting to win, to be honest. I'm like, okay. But some people are downplaying how Oregon played against Fresno State. But then there are certain people that, go, it was a generic game plan. They didn't do anything fancy. They kept it very basic and simple, saving it for Ohio State. So do you think that was part of the game plan? Or because I'm not super worried about the Fresno State game, to be honest, myself at least.
I think that most coaches, they're all different to a certain extent, but most coaches take a calculated risk in that situation to play very vanilla, especially in the first half, see how it goes, see if they believe that they can. And if you just go out there and run your base offense and you blow them out, and we got to think of that defensively too, in terms of showing coverages and blitzes, and just play base on both sides of the ball, and you're up 28-3 at halftime. Well, that worked out. Let's move on to next week. We're good, and we can save a large portion of the playbook for Ohio State. But I think they take a calculated risk if things aren't going so well as they weren't for Oregon at one point, to still save some of the playbook or some of the exotic looks on defense and still think they can win the game. So how much of that Oregon did, I did not watch the game. I just saw a few highlights. So I didn't watch Oregon play. So I don't know how much of that actually happened. When we talked to Mike Black from Fifth Quarter College Football on that Oregon show, he seemed to believe that Oregon saved quite a bit for Ohio State.
Well, that's what it seemed to me, and I'm a poor Ducks fan in that sense. I still don't have the Pac-12 network because my provider doesn't provide it, and so I'm on that way.
And you're located where?
But yeah, I'm in Texas, so actually okay. I like your late night shows because that gives me I'm a night person, so it gives me a chance where most other people have already gone off the air. You're still up and running.
I used to do them a lot later because I used to work at ESPN till 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and sometimes I would just hop on here that late. But anyway, I'm trying to more regulate my life, but maybe I'll start doing more late night shows because I'm a late night person too. I'm going to be up till 2, 3 in the morning at the earliest on a regular basis.
Yeah, I'm always up to at least 1, 2 in the morning. Well, like right now it's 1. I'll be up till probably 2 watching you. So if you're still on even, and then I'll go to sleep and I'll be like, crap again. But no, I agree. I think with a lot of people is that but a lot of people don't want to say that is that I think the whole game plan was super generic, and that's why it was so close. Now, was a little desperation at the end to get the win? Yeah. But again, I think it was the same. It was like Ohio State versus Minnesota. The first half was pretty abysmal for Ohio State for the most part. The second half, I think they kind of opened up the playbook to kind of like, okay, it's a little close right now. And I think Oregon really tried to keep it simple. And I'm hoping that's the case anyways.
Again, I didn't see it. So that's what I'm hearing from my guy Mike and hearing from you. And I would not be surprised. And I think I've watched enough football that I'll stand on the first statement said that I think that most coaches take a calculated risk in a situation like that where they're preparing for a better opponent the next week.
Well, and I agree. I mean, that's one thing I like about you the best, because you don't overreact. Most people are like, "Oh, Oregon looks terrible," and they're going to get blown out. And I'm like, you ever think that maybe they're looking ahead? Kind of like Iowa State. Somehow Iowa State's favored over Iowa, but Iowa State looked terrible to Northern Iowa. But people are like, "Oh, they were just looking ahead." I'm like, well, where's the consideration? Maybe Oregon was also looking ahead a little bit. It's inconsistent reporting, and so that's why I like you taking game by game and taking in consideration of maybe the next big game is the one that they're looking at and saving things.
I sat here the other night when people were going nuts that Saturday night and overreacting to all sorts of games. And I get it because it's the only game that we've seen. So if your team overachieved, you're excited. And if they disappointed like Oklahoma, people were about ready to jump off a bridge. And that you're going to overreact to a certain extent. But I take it from a pretty neutral view. And I'm just off the top of my head ripping off tons of teams over the past 10 years that had awful beginnings to their seasons, lost a game that you would think was just the end of the world, and turned around and did something with their season. I named all sorts of examples. Northwestern came to mind. They lost to Akron 2 years ago, and then they went to the Big Ten championship game. There's all sorts of examples out there.
Oh yeah, sometimes I think that's the foundation of sometimes some of the better teams. Sometimes some years is that they struggle at the beginning and then they hit their mark a couple games into the season. Even Oregon's national championship run, their first couple games they looked terrible, and then they hit their mark because they got a couple guys back.
Yeah, there are all sorts of examples of near misses against FCS and low group of 5 caliber teams, and teams being able to recover from that and do something with their season. It's still a valid complaint. It's still a valid concern. If your team struggled in week 1, that may hold, and they may turn out not to be a very good team. It is a game to evaluate. It does factor into it, and it is a part of the puzzle.
That's the excitement of college football. I mean, what do you think about? I've heard Cincinnati is officially requested to join the Big 12. Do you think that's I think it's a good move for Cincinnati, but what do you think about that?
So what is actually taking place is something that I predicted what was going to take place as soon as all of this blew up and Texas and Oklahoma left. I posted a video that said this is what's going to happen. Basically, whichever takes place first is going to turn out to be the result of the either fortification of and solidification of the Big 12 or the decimation of the Big 12. Either they're going to be able to go out there and package 4 schools together, and the 4 that I grabbed were something close to it's basically, I said Cincinnati, UCF, and then I said Houston, and then either Memphis or BYU. So that was my prediction. I said, if you're the Big 12, you go out and you grab 4 of those, and those 4 schools in and of themselves would not leave the American Conference by themselves to join the Big 12. I do not believe. So what was also key in this is that they were able to do that before any of the other 3 conferences poached them. But as soon as it became pretty obvious that the other 3 conferences were going to go through with this little alliance charade, and we're just going to stand pat and not poach teams from the Big 12, that they didn't find any of them to be worthy, that the Big 12 was going to be able to make an offer to these other schools from the American, solidify the Big 12, and go on from there. What was your original question? I'm sorry.
No, it was that a good move from Cincinnati? Do you think Cincinnati, like as soon as they were able to join the Big 12, like whenever it is, just say it's immediately following Oklahoma and Texas departure, whether it's 1, 2, 3 years, would Cincinnati, you think, be able to make an impact, or do you think it would be kind of like a TCU Utah move into the other conferences where it takes them a few years? Because I mean, Cincinnati's pretty good, but I mean, TCU and Utah were also very good too. So before they joined the bigger conference.
Sure. I do think that the American Conference is playing pretty good football, and based on what Cincinnati's shown us the last few years, I think that they could go right into the Big 12 and could be another TCU right now, be a TCU, be 8-4 good, 9-3 good, if they can maintain what they're doing right now. If the playoff continues to be a 4-team playoff for the next few years, then Cincinnati's done itself benefit by leaving because the group of 5 has not been considered during this 7-year run, even producing 3 undefeated teams, whereas they can go to the Big 12 and immediately compete for a playoff spot. Now, going forward, as soon as this 12-team proposal comes to fruition, it will be interesting to see what the powers that be consider the Big 12 to be. Are they going to consider the Big 12 to continue to be a Power 5 conference, or that it's now a Group of 5 conference? I would have to run the math on it to figure out, is this, because they're very much in limbo from a quality standpoint, in my estimation. You take away Texas and Oklahoma, and your quote unquote elite schools, elite football playing schools in your conference are who? TCU, Oklahoma State, Iowa State. Those are your elite schools. Cincinnati, I guess, if they can keep it up. So I don't know where to place them. I don't know if they're going to keep that status as a Power 5 and have more positions in the playoff than they would if they're considered a Group of 5. And I don't know if that's going to be formally announced by the powers that be to say these are the Power 4 or the Power 5, and this is everybody else, and this is how we're going to select it. And the top 4 get the buys, and so forth and so on.
Well, that's what I mean. That was why I was like, is it beneficial for Cincinnati? Because they could be jumping from one Group of 5 to a Power 5 to end up back in a Group of 5. Because, I mean, I think BYU carries some power. UCF kind of. But right now, Cincinnati is kind of the cream of the crop. And then BYU has its own power, especially if it can, replicate anything close to even last year. But then they would become the power teams to a degree once Oklahoma and Texas leaves, and what do you have then? So it's kind of a risk, I think, on both the conference and both those teams, all those teams that maybe jump.
Well, again, I didn't think any one of those schools would jump by themselves. I didn't think that they would go to a dying ship by themselves. I did think, and again, I posted a video that said they're going to have to get a 4-pack of them to come along together. And that's apparently what they've done. Now, I think the crown jewel out of those 4 is actually UCF. Cincinnati's the best football team right now, but UCF's in Florida with all that recruiting, all that talent. They're in Orlando.
Largest alumni
base, largest school. They've shown over the last 5 years they're committed to playing football. They want to win. They just threw a ton of money at Gus Malzahn. They want to play big time football, and they're with NIL. They're in Disney. That I just think that they're in a great place. Cincinnati's the best football playing school, and they're in a top 30 television market. Houston's in a huge television market, but nobody cares about them. It's an NFL city.
I know, I'm in Houston, so.
Do you? And BYU is an interesting. They're like a low grade Notre Dame. They have like this national brand reputation. They travel wherever because that's been the nature of their status as an independent. But yeah,
Yeah, I just found it interesting because, like, the Alliance came around, but like the next 10 years is already booked up with like Pac-12 playing Baylor home and home. I think Texas Tech home and home. And so, a lot of those are not going to change. I don't think a lot of people are going to pay buyouts for a lot of those games. So it was kind of, the Alliance was just more of a mutual agreement. And I think I get it. It was voting power. I think that was a lot of the deal with it, especially when the SEC becomes the power conference, so to say. But yeah, it's an interesting facet. I mean, obviously no one knows exactly what will happen right now or how it'll work out because everything is in flux right now. TV deals will change, and yeah, it's going to be an interesting situation coming up with all the new TV deals. But anyways, I'll get off of here, but I'm going to hang up. But I want to ask you one final question.
sure.
Do you think if LSU, and I'm an Oregon fan, I'm not a UCLA fan despite Chip Kelly, glad to see him finally having a little success, at least the first two games, looking pretty decent. If Ed Orgeron was to go 7-5 this year, let's just say 7-6, get a bowl game, lose the bowl game, or win the bowl game, a mediocre bowl game, would he be in, as some other people put it, Gene Chizik territory, 2 years removed from a national title?
So are you asking me just in regards to...
Well, I've heard a couple of people, a couple different places say this, but even Mark Helfrich's territory, 2 years removed and canned immediately, following like a season. Like, Mark Helfrich is the same thing. He didn't win the national championship, but he got to the championship game. 2 years later, they fired him. So what would be your thoughts on that? But I'll let you do that. I'm going to get off here and let someone else get on here. I'm looking forward to that response.
Thanks for the call. Appreciate it. Have a good night.
Have a good night.
So just to outline what was stated there, Gene Chizik, of course, won the national championship in 2010 over Oregon. 2 years later, 0-8 in the SEC, 2-9 or 3-9 overall, and out of a job. And Mark Helfrich took Chip Kelly's roster, went to the BCS championship game in 2014. 2 years later, he was 4-8 and out of a job. So Ed Orgeron had a decent season at LSU to conclude 2016 with Les Miles starting the season and getting fired after they lost in the closing seconds at Auburn. Went 10-3 the next year, finished in the top 10. Joe Burrow's first season at LSU, then, of course, took the top off and had a historic 15-0 national championship run, 5-5, 0-1 this year. Let's say this turns into a 7-6 type season for Ed Orgeron. So if you're talking at the outset of that question, I thought he was just talking about in regards to perception, what people would say about Ed Orgeron. And of course, if he keeps his job, then the book's not closed. But if he loses his job, Gene Chizik, before arriving at Auburn, I believe was 5-19. Somebody can check me on that. I believe that was the record at Iowa State. And he was he failed at being the first Matt Campbell. He wasn't able to turn around Iowa State football, so he was 5-19 and did what everybody else did at Iowa State, lose constantly. And of course, Mark Helfrich had never had a head coaching position at the Power 5 level before Oregon, and then he's never been heard of from since. So Ed Orgeron does have a pretty decent run at USC. He did coach at Ole Miss. He will tell you that he didn't coach very well, and the record would prove that he was still learning. Went to USC, did okay. Then, of course, he goes to LSU. So, long story short, Ed Ogeron is not a football genius. He's another version of Les Miles when it comes to his X's and O's acumen, his strategy, his ability to scheme. Does he know football? Of course. He spent his entire life in football. He played football, has coached football forever. He knows the game, but he's not Bill Belichick. He has the job because of his personality, because of his authority, because of his ability to relate to players and that they love him, much like Les Miles. They'll run through a brick wall for him, but he's not a football guru. Sure, he's going to be put in that basket in regards to he caught lightning in a bottle. If nothing else happens at LSU but playing marginal football and he gets fired, whether that be at the end of this year or next year after 7-5 and 6-6 or something to that degree, everyone will forever point to Joe Brady and Joe Burrow and remarkable talented wide receiver and all over the field as being the reason why Ed Ogeron ever won a national championship. That's what happens when you hit it big, you strike it while the iron's hot, but nothing else on your resume shows that you were capable under any other circumstance that you could win. These people are the antithesis of Urban Meyer and Nick Saban. Urban Meyer gets his first head coaching job at Bowling Green, turns them around, they win. He goes to Utah, boom, they're 13-0. He goes to Florida, takes them from 7-5, national championships. Goes to Ohio State, takes a bad situation, turns it around, 12-0, national championships. Those kind of guys are the antithesis of what the reputation is for Gene Chizik and Mark Helfrich and now possibly Ed Ogeron, that they can turn any situation into gold, as opposed to these guys that just kind of walked into the right situation, found a generational player in Cam Newton, inherited Chip Kelly roster and philosophy and scheme that was ahead of the curve and rode the wave to a national championship game. And then that's tough to do. Go from a national championship game to 4-8 2 years later. That means that Mark Helfrich was going 4-8 with half of his roster having competed, if not in that national championship game, for that national championship team. Like, you really have to head south in a hurry to go from national championship team to playing in the BCS title game to 4-8 2 years later. So to answer your question, yes. Ed Ogeron's legacy would be that other people propelled him and he was in the right place at the right time and he was carried to a national championship based on other people's talent. And he just was a good CEO of the situation. Barry Switzer with the Dallas Cowboys in relief of Jimmy Johnson. And there have been others. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark. This is Nick.
Hey, Nick.
From Michigan. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. How are you?
Great. Just wanted to make a few comments here real quick. Won't keep you too long on the Michigan-Washington game coming up.
I think that anyone who thinks that Washington is the same team that played Montana last week needs to understand that history will tell us that if we've got a pretty good read on a team, meaning that the optimistic Washington observer would have thought, okay, this is probably a 10-2 team, and at worst a 7-5 team, that they would be a 9-3, 8-4 type team, maybe north of that or south of that, but a good team that was preseason number 21 in the country. And I know that they lost to a FCS team. They could not generate offense. They couldn't run the ball. Their quarterback threw 3 interceptions. I only saw a couple of highlights. I didn't watch the game. I don't generally tune into Montana and Washington when the likes of Clemson and Georgia and Alabama and Miami are playing. So I'm just not going to watch that game. And so I saw the highlights because I thought, I want to see a little bit of what happened. The things that I noticed was that Washington could not generate a running game. So typically you've got a size and strength advantage on an FCS team, and they couldn't push them around.
Which that was shocking.
Yes.
To be honest, that was almost one of the most surprising things of the weekend.
Because usually what you run into when you take a high-level Power 5 that loses to an FCS or a low group of 5 is that they got to turn the ball over a ton, which they did 3 times, but usually it's more like 4 or 5 turnovers. Maybe there's a bad special teams botch somewhere that creates a touchdown. The quarterback threw away. Maybe you got a young player at quarterback who just isn't ready. And, if you got a bad player at quarterback, you can have a dominant offense or a good offense. And if he's throwing incomplete passes, he's throwing incomplete passes. So just certain things usually add up to the FCS team pulling off, some kind of last second win, where this was, kind of curious. The other thing was when they completed passes, they didn't get loose. So that means these FCS defenders were able to tackle in space because they completed 27 passes for only like 220 yards. So you're only completing for like 8 yards per completion. That's a low total. 46 pass attempts. They were only completing 5 yards per attempt. Yep.
The only thing I guess you could say to be devil's advocate is Washington does seem to be kind of depleted, the wide receiver position as far as playmakers go. I mean, I guess you could point to Giles Jackson, but I know everybody says Giles Jackson was, and I'm a Michigan fan, I'll be honest. Everybody says he's the fastest player on the field, which he's quick, don't get me wrong, but I mean, I guess I wouldn't call him a playmaker. I mean, everyone's going to refer to him as a kick returner more than anything else.
Yeah.
But as far as the wide receiver position, like just a true playmaker, I mean, they are pretty depleted. And I mean, we've seen Dylan Morris, their quarterback, have good games. We've seen him have bad games. For the first week 1 of the season, that can be tough to lose. I think they lost 4 guys, 4 guys, something like that. So, but I mean, like you said, that's still no excuse. I mean, it's an FCS school, so you would still expect athletes to the caliber of Giles Jackson. And I'm not really familiar with some of their other wide receivers, but I know they have talent. But a quick point I wanted to make is I've seen that there's a lot of clamoring about Sam Heward, 5-star quarterback behind Dylan Morris, and the potential, if Dylan Morris is playing poorly in that game, which Jimmy Lake came out and said Dylan Morris is the starter, so I think everyone's expecting him to start. An important note to make on that is Dylan Morris is a right-handed quarterback. Sam Heward is actually left-handed. So, in my opinion, to think that mid-game you would make a switch of that, especially when I don't believe they're going to be getting most of those wide receivers back. I think that's an important note to make. I don't think that's likely. That could play a huge part going from a right-handed quarterback, regardless of whether a guy's a high-rated 5-star. Sam Heward, I believe, is left-handed. So that could kind of pose some issues even if you need to make a change. And then also the other interesting point I've seen from Michigan fans is this quote-unquote quarterback battle or controversy, I guess, going on. And in my opinion, I mean, it's almost like people are acting like Cade McNamara when he was playing did not make explosive plays on the field. And everyone's talking about, and I love J.J. McCarthy. I still think he's extremely raw. There was a comparison made by Dan Orlovsky on the live game. Like this is a Trevor Lawrence and Kelly Bryant situation or whatever that. And I don't think that's accurate at all. That was just a faceplant comment, in my opinion. But because Cade McNamara, I think, is a way better passer, and he was making passes downfield. But I liked your point where you said, it's one thing to make an incredible play based off talent. It's another thing to run an offense. And I think Cade McNamara almost proved that just from the first drive. And they didn't ask him to do much after that. But, I mean, he had a 76-yard touchdown pass to Ronnie Bell. And if you also go back and you look at that pass where he made to Ronnie Bell for the one-handed catch, which, I mean, maybe could be highlight play of the season. If they don't call that pass interference call, I almost feel like people won't even be talking about this quarterback controversy. So J.J. McCarthy made a great play, but if that play stands up with Cade McNamara and Ronnie Bell, I almost feel like it's a whole different discussion. So I kind of find that funny. I feel like the only reason why people are saying there's a quarterback controversy is maybe because of that pass interference and it didn't count. So, but besides that, I guess those were just a few points I wanted to throw in there. Major thing, again, is Sam Heward is, I believe, a left-handed quarterback. So I hear people talking about they're going to make the switch mid-game. I mean, you know way more about college football than I do, but I think going from a right-handed quarterback to a left-hand, I mean, that could be a big thing. If you were to, now I guess if it goes disastrous or whatever, you got to do what you got to do. But I guess that's a thing to keep an eye on. So,
well, it's a good point. It's a good point. No team wants to make that quarterback change. Of course, they want to be successful at quarterback, but they especially don't want to make it if they're going to another unproven commodity. If they've got a quarterback, and this happens more in the pros, of course, than it does in college, where you've got a proven commodity on the sideline. So you at least know, okay, if we hand it to him, he's not a superstar, but he's dependable. He's been playing for 10 years. We know who he is. And there are some cases that happens to a lesser degree in college where you know who you're handing the quarterback reins to if the first guy gets benched. But in this case, yeah, he's a highly touted recruit, but he's never proven anything at this level. And then if he, I think back to Miami in 2018, Mark Richt he had one game in particular at Virginia where he made a couple bad moves and he got caught in a situation where both quarterbacks had kind of tanked on him and he had nowhere to go, and he had already yanked one probably too early, and then he went to the other one and he didn't perform. And you can't bring in the first guy again, bring him back. And so that's why they get paid so much money. They have to make difficult decisions, of course. So, and it would be interesting to know the perception of the fan base real quick. It would be interesting to know the perception of the fan base on that incredible throw by J.J. McCarthy if he was not a 5-star.
Well, and that pass again, I'm a Michigan fan. I love it. But, I mean, there was a couple passes before he threw that were not accurate. I mean, almost there was a bullet that he threw right down the middle, and Dan Orlovsky he's like, there's heat coming off that. And there was a few passes in there that were inaccurate. And in my mind, I get, I'm thinking, oh no, here we go again. A talented guy. It was like almost Joe Milton-esque. He's throwing it behind his man and whatnot. Not saying it was that bad or anything. But, you hear it all before. This guy's super talented. He's, gets a standing ovation. We'll see what he does. And I mean, I do think J.J. McCarthy has a bright future, but I just think that I I mean, at this point, the Michigan fan base has been beaten into a level of insanity from losing so many times to Ohio State. It seems like that if a good quarterback came along, they're so impatient. They want to see that explosive, that wow factor. And it's like, I don't know. To me, I just don't want to see another wasted opportunity. You know, like, and I guess an example to me would be previously in Michigan history would be Tom Brady. How many times did he bring them back and whatnot? And the Drew Henson thing and everything. But I don't know. We'll see what happens. I'm excited for the game. I'm honestly not. I really have no idea what's going to happen because obviously Washington has a much better defense than Western, and it's interesting because I thought Washington's defense played very well. Some people call them DBU and everything, but so yeah, it's going to be a great game. And we'll see what happens. Do you also, real quick, want to get your thoughts on how are you feeling about Ohio State versus Oregon coming up?
I think it's going to be a close game, closer than most people that I hear. I think Oregon is going to be impacted by their injuries on defense. So in the college game, we never know what those injuries are or how extensive they are. So that's a guessing game. We're talking about three of their best defensive players. So that's tough to determine, and that could swing the game right there. And Ohio State's in a similar situation with two of its top defensive backs in Cam Brown and Saban Banks. Are they going to play? Who knows? So that's going to be enormous right there. I think Ohio State's decidedly they are the better team. They're the more talented team. I would not be surprised if they lost the game. I think Oregon has a 30-some% chance of winning.
I gotta be honest. I guess again, coming as a Michigan fan, I was a little bit shocked from the Ohio State fan base's reaction to CJ Stroud starting, not throwing a pass in college on the road, and doing what he did against Minnesota. And, you know, just from my perspective, the issues we've had, you know, as the quote unquote bitter rival, how many programs would, this is just my opinion. I think he has a really bright future. I didn't see anything alarming. And honestly, people kind of crushed him.
Yeah, they did. They did. And I thought it was unfair.
It was kind of ridiculous. And I'm not even saying that directed towards the Ohio State fan base specifically, but just, you know, from an outsider looking in, I mean, again, I think it's maybe a situation where we can look back and say, okay, Justin Fields, is he going to be Justin Fields? Probably not. But you had Justin Fields, generational type talent. Trevor Lawrence playing at the same time, generational type talent. Throwing Joe Burrow, he was active when those guys were. I mean, I think people need to take a step back and think, like, when have we seen that type of talent in college football at the same time? Like, it's just because we're in this era of explosive offenses where, you know, even just a good quarterback with a solid defense, you know, that team can win 40-10 on any given night. You don't have that kind of talent. I mean, these are like once in a decade type players that happen to be in the same timeline. And CJ Stroud, I mean, I think he's an incredible talent. I thought he played very well. He had, you know, some easy passes early on to get him into the groove, but I mean,
Absolutely.
He has a great coach in Ryan.
Well, I appreciate the call.
So,
definitely. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. We need to move along with these calls. Welcome to the Voice for College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's Sam.
Hey, Sam, what's going on?
Hey, thanks for doing this. Even for some of us in the West Coast, it's 11:30. You're amazing for doing this. So I just want to say thank you for that.
Thanks.
And
Sam.
I also had a couple of quick points, if I may.
Of course.
So first of all, I think it's pretty obvious that Oregon is not as talented as Ohio State. I don't think anybody is going to discount. Going to argue with this, but Oregon is not going to get blown out. I just want to tell people the Ohio State, the delusional fan base that thinks that they're going to get blown out 44-10. It's not going to happen. I think Mario Cristobal is building a real football team that wants to compete with the front seven, with the SECs, the Ohio States, and the Clemsons of the world for the long haul. And they're not going to get blown out. They're going to lose, probably, I would say, but they're not going to get blown out. So I wanted to let everybody know that Oregon is building a serious program out here in the West Coast, number one.
I agree, sir. What's point number two?
Point number two is quarterbacks, college quarterbacks. I think we're starting to see an end to the era of these game manager type of quarterbacks that win championships. I think there was a Florida quarterback, I don't remember, like 15 years ago or something, that won a Heisman. He had no right to win a Heisman because Florida won a championship or got close to a championship. I think these kind of mediocre college quarterbacks are no longer going to be relevant. You're either elite for an elite football team, or you're irrelevant. I think it's become more and more like college quarterbacks that used to be decent but never had a shot at the pros. Those kind of quarterbacks being relevant is over. So that was my second.
Are you talking about Chris Leak winning the national championship at Florida, who was not an NFL quarterback?
Well, I think there was another Florida quarterback that basically had no chance to play in the pros, but he was really highly thought of. I don't remember his name, though.
They had another quarterback who won the Heisman Trophy and a national championship, but he did play in the pros.
Who was that?
Tim Tebow.
Well, don't get me started on Tebow. I'm not exactly a Tebow fan, but I just wanted to call in and say Oregon is going to show up for this game. If they get blown out, I'll shave my head. That's all.
All right, Sam. You're going to have to send in the video of you shaving your head. We appreciate the call.
I'll do something stupid
Okay.
if Oregon doesn't show up. Let's put it that way.
All right, Sam. Thanks for the call. Appreciate that, man. All right. The phone lines are empty, so I believe we've hit the end of the line here at the Voice of College Football. You never know if I will possibly hit the airwaves tomorrow. The airwaves. I sound like I'm in 1950s radio. I'm going to hit the live stream tomorrow night, possibly. We shall see, but I've got a lot to work on, and we will get after it. Now, on Saturday, again, if you root for a particular team, please check out our post game. We most likely cover your team, most likely, because we're going to have post game for Ohio State, Michigan, Nebraska, Penn State, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Florida, LSU, Alabama, Georgia, Florida State, Miami, Notre Dame as well. Not a whole lot of great games. I'm going to be honest. But we do have Texas, Arkansas. I'm looking forward to that one. Of course, Ohio State and Oregon. I like that Iowa State matchup. I'm going to be watching that. Maybe I'm going to. I've had a few different thoughts the last few weeks of whether you guys would like to see power rankings. No, see, those would be different than rankings based on resume. We would do power rankings, maybe in each conference. Maybe I'm going to do, especially after we get some more out of conference games under our belts. This week we've got the SEC against the Big 12 with Texas, Arkansas. We've got the Big 10 and the Pac-12 twice with Washington, Michigan, Oregon, Ohio State. We've got the Big 12 and the Big 10 with Iowa and Iowa State. And that's pretty much it between the Power Five. The ACC goes into a shell this weekend, don't they? I don't think we've got any non-conference games that matter at all, do we? Let's look at this for a second. We have nobody. The SEC, you got Arkansas, Texas, and you've got Missouri's playing Kentucky. Otherwise, everybody else, nothing. But I might do with some power rankings. And after we get some more data in, start making some conference comparisons. May need to do that as well. Because this week, so tomorrow night, we've got Kansas taking on Coastal Carolina. That should be a blowout, and not really anything to get too excited about tomorrow night, although Boise State's playing against UTEP. Okay. We've got a Big Ten matchup against the ACC, Illinois, Virginia. Then the other games I mentioned, ACC, SEC, Pitt, Tennessee. And that's about it. Everybody else in the SEC and the ACC just going into hibernation. We've got a Pac-12 SEC matchup with Texas A&M and Colorado. Okay. But man, not a whole lot. 4 games to get excited about. Michigan, Washington, Ohio State, Oregon, Texas, Arkansas, Iowa, Iowa State. And I could watch Miami, Appalachian State, North Carolina State, Mississippi State. Okay, another ACC, SEC game right there. And Missouri and Kentucky is going to be an interesting game to see who may be a dark horse in the SEC East. USC is playing Stanford. BYU is playing Utah. This is what hurts me late Saturday night when I get on here after the primetime game is we've got Utah, BYU, and USC and Stanford. 2 games I would like to watch, but I'll be here talking college football with all of you. So we'll watch those together, which I always say that, but then I never know what's going on because I get engaged in the conversation. But okay, we might do a viewing guide as well, kind of how I map out my viewing guide each and every weekend for college football. But if you guys have any requests, any recommendations on what kind of videos you'd like to see me produce, certainly leave those comments, not here, but at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. MarkRogersTV at Gmail if you've got any specific requests on. So, for example, I produced a Heisman watch list because I figured, okay, I'm seeing all these big splashes by semi-unknown players and somewhat famous players through the first week of the season. And I'm seeing Spencer Rattler struggle and Sam Howell struggle and Breece Hall struggle. And somebody else that came to mind that didn't play too well in week 1. So I thought, you know what? Let's do a Heisman watch list that actually makes sense. But that didn't take too well. So maybe we'll let the Heisman. When I used to have like 80 subscribers, I did Heisman videos that did better than that one. So apparently nobody was caring too much about the Heisman race at this point. All right, everyone. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. For those of you who just started watching us, we're glad that you are here. Enjoy the ride for the college football season and let me know what you want to hear. Requests are always taken. And if I can't fulfill them, especially if they're off-season type topics, then I will let you know why. But we'll be back live for sure on Monday. On Monday, what am I talking about? Saturday's coming up. We got college football on Saturday. We'll see you then. It's getting late. See you Saturday, maybe tomorrow. We've got Arkansas and Oregon videos posted in the morning. Cheryl, see ya. Thank you.